The afternoon sun hung low over the crowded roadside market, baking the dusty street and filling the air with a rich aroma of fried plantains, pepper soup, and grilled meat. Motorcycles buzzed past like angry bees, traders shouted their prices, and hungry workers crowded around small food stalls. At the corner of the street stood Amara's small wooden stand, patched together with faded planks and a sheet of rusted zinc. Steam rose from the pot of jollof rice beside her while she carefully scooped food into plastic plates for waiting customers. Beside her stood a small boy of about 5, swinging his legs against a wooden stool as he watched her work. "Mama, can I taste the stew?" the boy asked eagerly. Amara smiled softly. After the customers, Kofi. Patience brings the sweetest reward. Suddenly, the sound of engines drowned out the market noise. A convoy of 3 glossy black SUVs rolled slowly into the narrow street, forcing traders to step aside. The vehicles stopped directly in front of Amara's stall. Doors opened. Out stepped a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit, his shoes shining brighter than anything in the entire market. Adrian Cole, one of the richest businessmen in the city. He glanced around with visible discomfort, covering his nose slightly. Seriously, he muttered to the driver behind him. "This is the place you suggested for lunch." The driver shrugged nervously. "Sir, people say the food here is famous." Adrian looked at Amara's stall with obvious disgust. The uneven wooden counter, the plastic chairs, the smoke drifting from the cooking pot. He laughed coldly. "This place looks like a health inspector's nightmare." The nearby traders fell silent. Amara slowly looked up from the plate she was serving. "If the food offends you, sir," she said calmly, "the road is wide enough for you to keep moving." A few customers exchanged nervous glances. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the cook has an attitude." He walked closer, studying the food. "You sell this on the street and expect people to eat it?" Amara placed a plate in front of a customer without looking at him. "Yet you stopped here," she replied quietly. A faint murmur of approval passed through the crowd. Adrian's expression hardened. He pulled out a thick stack of cash and tossed several bills onto the table. "Here," he said arrogantly. "This should cover your entire day's sales." The money fluttered across the wooden counter. Amara didn't touch it. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked. Adrian smirked. "It means you can close early and save everyone from food poisoning." A stunned silence fell across the stall. Kofi slid down from the stool and stepped closer to his mother. Amara's eyes burned with quiet anger. "My food feeds honest workers every day," she said firmly. Adrian chuckled. "Workers, maybe, but not people who value quality." Just then, Kofi accidentally bumped into Adrian while trying to step around him. "Oh, sorry, sir," the boy said quickly. Adrian looked down in irritation, but something stopped him. The boy's small hand was resting on the edge of the table. On his wrist was a crescent-shaped birthmark. Adrian's breath caught. Slowly, almost unconsciously, he rolled up the sleeve of his own suit. On his wrist, the exact same crescent mark stared back at him. The market noise faded around him. Adrian's voice came out barely above a whisper. "How did you get that mark, boy?" Kofi blinked innocently. "I was born with it." Adrian looked from a child to Amara, and for the first time since stepping out of the car, the powerful billionaire felt something close to fear. The market noise slowly returned, but Adrian Cole could barely hear it. His eyes remained locked on the crescent-shaped birthmark on the boy's wrist. The same mark, the exact same shape, the exact same place. A cold wave of disbelief ran through him. Slowly, he reached forward and grabbed the boy's wrist. "Wait. Let me see that again," Adrian said, his voice tense. Kofi looked confused, but didn't resist. Before Adrian could examine it properly, Amara slapped his hand away sharply. "Don't touch my child." The surrounding traders gasped softly. Adrian stepped back, surprised by the sudden force in her voice. Kofi quickly hid behind his mother's dress. Amara placed a protective arm around him. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "First you insult my food, now you grab my son?" Adrian barely heard her. His mind was racing. "How old is he?" Adrian asked suddenly. Amara narrowed her eyes. "That's none of your business." Adrian pointed toward Kofi's wrist. That mark. Where did he get it? Amara crossed her arms defensively. He was born with it. Adrian's stomach tightened. What's his age? He asked again, more urgently this time. I said it's none of your business, she replied firmly. The tension between them thickened. Some traders leaned closer, pretending to arrange their goods while secretly listening. Adrian lowered his voice. Just answer the question. Amara's eyes flashed with anger. You think because you arrived here in expensive cars, you can interrogate people? Adrian hesitated. His confidence was beginning to crack. Kofi peeked out from behind his mother and studied Adrian curiously. You have the same mark as me, the boy said suddenly. The words hung in the air like thunder. Several customers turned to look. Adrian slowly rolled up his sleeve again. The crescent-shaped birthmark was clearly visible. A whisper spread through the small crowd. They're identical. Amara's face stiffened. For a brief second, something unreadable flashed across her expression. Then she quickly looked away. It means nothing, she said coldly. Kofi tilted his head. Mama, why does Uncle have my mark? Amara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marks happen to many people. But Adrian could see the tension in her face. He knelt slightly so he could look directly at the boy. What's your name? Adrian asked. Kofi, the boy replied happily. And your father? Adrian asked quietly. Kofi shrugged. I don't have one. The words hit Adrian like a punch. What do you mean you don't have one? He asked slowly. Kofi answered with innocent honesty. Mama says my father traveled far away before I was born. The market fell silent again. Adrian looked up at Amara. Her jaw tightened. Children say many things, she said quickly. Adrian's heart was pounding now. 5 years. The boy looked about 5. A memory stirred somewhere deep in his mind. A dim hotel room. Rain tapping against a window. A woman whose face he could barely remember. A night he had never thought about again. Adrian stood up abruptly. When exactly was he born? He demanded. Amara grabbed Kofi's hand. That's enough. She began packing the food containers quickly. Customers stepped aside as she worked. You're leaving? Adrian asked. Yes. Why? Amara lifted the food pot onto her head basket. Then she looked directly at him. Because rich men like you only bring trouble. She turned and walked into the crowd with Kofi. Adrian stood frozen beside the stall. His driver approached carefully. Sir, should we go? Adrian's eyes followed the disappearing figures. No, he murmured. Something about that boy had shaken him to his core. And one terrifying thought echoed inside his mind. What if the child was his? The convoy of black SUVs pulled away from the noisy market, but Adrian Cole remained unusually quiet in the back seat. Normally, his phone would already be ringing with business calls, stock reports, and impatient executives. Today, he ignored everything. His mind was stuck on one image. The crescent-shaped birthmark on the boy's wrist. Exactly like his. Adrian slowly rolled up his sleeve again and stared at his own wrist. The mark had been there since birth. Doctors once called it rare. Very rare. Which meant one thing. It was almost impossible for two strangers to have the exact same mark. His driver glanced at him through the rear-view mirror. Sir, are you all right? Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back and closed his eyes. And that was when the memory began to return. 5 years ago, a rainy night in the city. Adrian had been younger then, wilder, careless with both money and people. He had just closed a huge business deal and celebrated at one of the city's luxury hotels. The drinks flowed endlessly. Music echoed through the rooftop bar. Laughter. Flashing lights. Then there was a woman. Adrian couldn't remember her face clearly, but he remembered her voice. Soft, calm, different from the women who usually surrounded wealthy men. She had been sitting alone at the far end of the bar. He remembered sitting beside her, talking, laughing, the rain falling outside the glass walls. Then the memory skipped forward. The hotel room, a moment of passion that felt real in a night that otherwise felt empty. And then morning. Adrian had woken up early for a flight. The woman was still asleep beside him. He didn't ask her name. He didn't leave a number. He simply left. Like the night meant nothing. Adrian suddenly opened his eyes. His chest tightened. "Sir," the driver said again. Adrian leaned forward. "Turn the car around." The driver blinked. "Back to the market?" "Yes." Minutes later, the SUVs returned to the crowded street. But the stall was empty. The wooden table was gone. The cooking pot was gone. Even the plastic chairs had disappeared. Only the dusty ground remained. Adrian stepped out of the car, slowly. The traders nearby watched him curiously. He walked to a nearby fruit seller. "The woman who was selling food here," Adrian said. "Where did she go?" The fruit seller shrugged. "She packed up quickly after you left." "Where does she live?" "No idea." "Does she sell here every day?" The man shook his head. "That woman moves around a lot." "Why?" The fruit seller lowered his voice. "She doesn't like attention." Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" The man leaned closer. "Some people say she's hiding from someone." Adrian's stomach tightened. "Hiding from who?" The fruit seller simply shrugged again. "Only she knows." Adrian stood silently beside the empty space where the stall had been. Something about the woman's sudden disappearance didn't feel like coincidence. It felt deliberate, as if she had seen the same connection he saw, as if she had recognized the birthmark, and left before he could ask more questions. Adrian slowly picked up something lying on the ground. A small plastic toy car, probably the boy's. He turned it in his hand. His driver spoke carefully. "Sir, do you really think that child could be yours?" Adrian looked toward the crowded market street where Amara had disappeared. For the first time in years, the powerful billionaire felt uncertain. "I don't know," Adrian admitted quietly. Then he tightened his grip on the toy. "But I'm going to find out. And somewhere in the city." Amara walked quickly through narrow streets with Kofi beside her. The boy looked up at her. "Mama, why did we leave so fast?" Amara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she held his hand tighter, because deep inside her heart, a fear she had buried for 5 years had suddenly returned. The next morning, Adrian Cole arrived at his office earlier than usual. The tall glass building overlooked the entire city, a symbol of power he had spent years building. Normally, the view filled him with pride. Today, he barely noticed it. Instead, he stood beside the window, staring down at the streets far below. Somewhere out there were a woman and a boy who might completely change his life. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," Adrian said. His assistant, Daniel, stepped inside, holding a tablet. "You asked me to investigate something, sir." Adrian turned. "Did you find her?" Daniel hesitated. "Not exactly." Adrian's patience thinned instantly. "What does that mean?" Daniel walked closer and placed the tablet on the desk. "I asked people around the market about the food seller. Her name is Amara." Adrian nodded slowly. "I already suspected that." Daniel continued. "But no one seems to know where she lives." "That's impossible." Daniel shook his head. "Apparently, she moves her food stall every few days." Adrian frowned. "Why would someone do that?" Daniel shrugged. "Some traders say she doesn't like drawing attention. Others say she's careful." "Careful of what?" Daniel lowered his voice. "Of rich men." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That woman thinks I'm dangerous." Daniel chose his words carefully. "Well, sir, yesterday you did insult her in front of an entire market." Adrian sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I know." The memory of Amara's calm but angry face replayed in his mind. He had mocked her, humiliated her, and if the boy truly was his son, the guilt felt heavier. Adrian sat down slowly. "Did anyone mention a child?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Adrian leaned forward. "What did they say?" "They say the boy's name is Kofi. He's always with her." Adrian felt something tighten in his chest again. Daniel continued scrolling through information. "But there's something strange." Adrian looked up. "What?" Daniel hesitated. "Some vendors said Amara used to stay in one place before." "What changed?" Daniel met Adrian's eyes. "She started moving her stall about 5 years ago." Adrian went completely still. 5 years. The same time the boy would have been born. "Did anyone say why?" Adrian asked quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. Rumor says she had trouble with a wealthy man. Adrian's heart pounded. What kind of trouble? Daniel shook his head. No one knows the full story. Silence filled the office. Adrian walked back to the window, staring at the city again. If Amara had been hiding from a rich man, was it possible she had been hiding from him all along? Daniel finally broke the silence. Sir, what exactly is going on? Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rolled up his sleeve again. The crescent-shaped birthmark glowed under the office lights. The boy has the same mark, Adrian said quietly. Daniel blinked in shock. You mean? Adrian exhaled slowly. I'm not certain yet. But if that child is mine, his voice hardened, then I owe him something I've never given anyone before. What's that? Daniel asked. Adrian turned from the window. A father. Daniel looked uneasy. Sir, if the media finds out about this. Adrian interrupted him. I don't care about the media. For the first time since becoming a billionaire, Adrian realized something terrifying. All his wealth meant nothing if he had unknowingly abandoned his own child. Daniel finally asked the question lingering in the air. So what's the plan? Adrian walked toward the door. We find her. Daniel followed him. And if she doesn't want to be found? Adrian paused briefly. Then he said something that surprised even himself. Then we keep searching. Across the city, in a crowded open market, Amara was setting up another food stall. Kofi happily arranged plastic spoons on the table. Then, he suddenly pointed across the road. Mama, look. Amara turned. Her heart skipped. Because, parked quietly across the street, was a black SUV she recognized. The morning market buzzed with life. Vendors shouted prices. Motorcycles squeezed through narrow spaces. The smell of fried yam and pepper sauce drifted through the humid air. Amara arranged plates neatly on her small wooden stall, while Kofi carefully lined up plastic spoons. Mama, is this straight? Kofi asked proudly. Amara smiled softly. Yes, very straight. Then Kofi suddenly froze. His eyes widened. Mama, look. Amara followed the direction of his finger. Across the road, parked quietly beside a row of taxis, sat a black SUV. Her stomach tightened instantly. The same vehicle from yesterday. Before she could react, the door opened. Adrian Cole stepped out. He looked calmer today, but his presence still drew attention. Several traders whispered as he walked slowly toward the stall. Amara continued arranging food as if she hadn't noticed him. Adrian stopped in front of the stall. Good morning, he said. Amara didn't look up. We are not open for insults today. A few nearby customers chuckled quietly. Adrian exhaled. I didn't come to insult you. Amara finally raised her eyes. Then why are you here? Adrian glanced briefly at Kofi. The boy smiled brightly. Hello, uncle with my mark. Adrian forced a small smile. Hello, Kofi. Amara's face hardened again. You shouldn't talk to strangers, she told the boy gently. But he's not a stranger, Kofi said innocently. He has my mark. The words made several nearby traders glance over again. Amara quickly changed the subject. What do you want? She asked Adrian coldly. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and placed an envelope on the counter. What is that? She asked. Money. Amara's eyes narrowed. For what? For the boy, Adrian replied calmly. Amara didn't even touch the envelope. You think money solves everything? Adrian shook his head. No. Then take it back. Adrian pushed it slightly closer. At least use it for his school. Amara's voice rose slightly. My son does not need charity. It's not charity, Adrian said carefully. Then what is it? Adrian hesitated. Before he could answer, Kofi spoke again. Uncle, why do you look like you're thinking very hard? The nearby traders laughed softly. Adrian crouched slightly to Kofi's level. I am thinking about something important. What thing? Kofi asked curiously. Adrian looked at the birthmark again. About how two people can share the same mark. Kofi lifted his wrist happily. Maybe we're family. The innocent statement froze everyone nearby. Amara's expression darkened. That's enough, she said sharply. She grabbed Kofi's hand. Go sit. Kofi obediently returned to his stool. Adrian stood slowly. You know the possibility is real, he said quietly. Amara leaned closer across the counter. Listen carefully. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Even if you were the father. My son survived 5 years without you. Adrian felt the words like a blade. I know, he admitted. Amara straightened. And we will survive the next 5 the same way. She picked up the envelope and shoved it back into his hand. Take your money. Adrian didn't move. Kofi suddenly ran over again. Uncle. He grabbed Adrian's sleeve excitedly. You forgot to answer my question. What question? Adrian asked. Kofi pointed to their wrists. Why do we have the same mark? Adrian opened his mouth. But before he could speak, Amara stepped between them. Her voice was firm. Because sometimes life plays strange tricks. Then she looked directly into Adrian's eyes. And some questions are better left unanswered. Adrian studied her face. But he noticed something new. For the first time. Amara looked uncertain. As if even she wasn't completely sure of the truth anymore. The afternoon sun had begun to soften, but the tension around Amara's stall only grew heavier. Adrian Cole remained standing beside the wooden counter. He had not moved. Neither had Amara. Customers who had come to eat now lingered longer than usual, pretending to focus on their plates while quietly listening. Kofi sat on his stool swinging his legs, unaware that the adults around him were standing in the middle of something life-changing. Adrian finally broke the silence. We need to talk. Amara folded her arms. There's nothing to talk about. There is, Adrian insisted calmly. You're imagining problems where none exist. Adrian pointed gently toward Kofi's wrist. That mark says otherwise. Amara looked at the boy for a brief moment. Then she turned back to Adrian. You think a birthmark proves something? It proves enough to ask questions. Amara shook her head. You rich people always want answers to everything. Adrian leaned slightly closer. And you seem determined to avoid them. The air between them tightened. Kofi suddenly hopped down from his stool and walked toward them. Mama, are you fighting again? Amara forced a small smile. No, we're just talking. Kofi looked up at Adrian curiously. Uncle, are you angry? Adrian softened his voice. No, Kofi. Then why are you asking so many questions? Adrian hesitated. Because sometimes questions help people understand things. Kofi nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Amara gently guided him back toward the stool. Sit there for a minute. Once the boy turned away, Adrian spoke again. 5 years ago, he said carefully. Did you meet a man in a hotel during a rainstorm? Amara froze. Just for a second. But Adrian saw it. Her fingers tightened around the spoon she was holding. You're mistaken, she said quickly. Adrian watched her closely. You didn't answer the question. I already did. No, Adrian said quietly. You avoided it. Amara's patience snapped. Yes, I met a man once. The nearby traders looked up instantly. Amara lowered her voice again. It was one night, she continued. One stranger. Nothing more. Adrian's heart pounded. What happened after? He left. Did you ever see him again? No. Did you know his name? Amara shook her head slowly. No. The answer landed like a stone between them. Adrian exhaled. And 9 months later, Amara's eyes hardened. I had a child. Did you ever try to find the man? Amara laughed bitterly. Find him where? She gestured around the market. Men like that don't leave addresses for women like me. Adrian felt the guilt settle deeper. Then let's remove the doubt, he said firmly. Amara frowned. What do you mean? A DNA test. Amara stared at him. You think I will drag my child into a hospital because of your curiosity? It's not curiosity, Adrian said quietly. It's responsibility. Amara shook her head immediately. No. Why not? Because rich men disappear when truth becomes inconvenient. Adrian opened his mouth to respond. But before he could speak, Kofi suddenly ran back toward them. His small face was bright with curiosity. Uncle. Yes. Kofi grabbed Adrian's wrist and held it beside his own. Look, their 2 birthmarks sat side by side. Perfectly identical. Kofi grinned proudly. Mama. See? They match. For the first time, Amara didn't immediately answer. She stared at the marks. Longer than before. And slowly, A small shadow of doubt appeared in her eyes. The small medical clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh paint. Adrian sat in the waiting area, his fingers tapping nervously against the arm of the chair. Across from him, Amara sat stiffly beside Kofi, her posture straight and guarded. Kofi swung his legs happily, completely unaware that his life might be changing forever. "Mama, how long will this take?" the boy asked. "Not long," Amara replied quietly. Adrian glanced at them but quickly looked away. The silence between them felt heavier than anything he had experienced in years. A nurse stepped into the waiting room. "Mr. Cole?" Adrian stood immediately. "Yes. The samples have been processed," the nurse said. "The doctor will explain the results." Adrian's stomach tightened. Amara crossed her arms. "Let's just get this over with." They followed the nurse into a small office. The doctor sat behind a desk, holding a thin file. "Please sit," he said calmly. Adrian and Amara sat opposite each other. Kofi climbed onto the chair beside his mother. The doctor adjusted his glasses. "I understand you requested a paternity test." Adrian nodded. "Yes." The doctor opened the file slowly. "The results are very clear." Adrian felt his pulse quicken. Amara's face remained unreadable. The doctor looked directly at Adrian. "The probability that you are the biological father of the child is 99.9%. The words seemed to freeze the air in the room. Kofi blinked. "What does that mean?" Neither adult answered immediately. Adrian felt the weight of the moment settle on his chest. The impossible had become reality. The boy was his son. He slowly looked at Kofi again. The same curious eyes. The same crescent-shaped birthmark. Amara suddenly stood up. "This changes nothing." Adrian looked up quickly. "Amara, no," she said firmly. "We came for answers. Now we have them." She grabbed Kofi's hand. "Let's go." Kofi looked confused. "But, Mama, what did the doctor say?" Amara hesitated. Adrian spoke quietly. He said, "I'm your father." Kofi's eyes widened. "My father." The boy looked between them. "You mean, Uncle with my mark is my father?" Amara closed her eyes briefly. "Yes." Kofi stared at Adrian with fascination. "I have a father." He smiled brightly. But the happiness in the room lasted only a second. Amara pulled him gently toward the door. "Come on." Adrian stood quickly. "Wait." Amara stopped but didn't turn around. "You can't just walk away now," Adrian said. Amara looked back slowly. "Why not?" "Because he's my son." Her eyes hardened. "And for 5 years, he has been only mine." Adrian stepped forward. "I didn't know he existed." "And whose fault is that?" she shot back. Adrian had no answer. The silence said everything. Kofi looked up at them both. "Are you too angry?" Amara softened slightly. "No, sweetheart." Then she turned back to Adrian. Her voice was calm but firm. "You had your test. You got your answer. But being a father is more than blood." She pointed gently toward Kofi. "That boy has never needed you before." She opened the door. "And he doesn't need you now." With that, Amara walked out with Kofi. Adrian stood frozen in the office. The doctor cleared his throat quietly. "Mr. Cole, congratulations." Adrian didn't move. Because the truth he had chased for days had finally arrived. And somehow, it felt less like a victory, and more like the beginning of a very difficult fight. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the market street. Amara worked quietly behind her stall, stirring a large pot of stew while customers came and went. From the outside, everything looked normal. But inside her mind, nothing felt normal anymore. Every time she glanced at Kofi, the doctor's words echoed again. 99.9%. She shook the thought away and focused on serving food. Kofi sat on his usual stool, drawing shapes on a piece of cardboard with a dull pencil. "Mama," he said suddenly. "Yes." "Does this mean I really have a father?" Amara paused. The question hung heavily in the warm air. "Yes," she answered softly. Kofi's eyes brightened. "Is it the rich uncle?" Amara nodded reluctantly. "Yes." Kofi grinned. He seemed nice. Amara looked down at the pot. "Nice people don't disappear for 5 years." Kofi tilted his head. "But he didn't know about me." Amara had no quick reply. Before she could speak again, a familiar voice appeared behind the stall. That's exactly what I've been trying to explain. Amara stiffened. She turned slowly. Adrian stood a few steps away. He wasn't wearing his expensive suit today. Instead, he wore a simple shirt and dark trousers. Still, people around the market instantly recognized him. Whispers began spreading. The billionaire is back. Amara's expression hardened immediately. You should leave. Adrian didn't move. I came to talk. There's nothing left to say. Adrian stepped closer to the stall. There's everything left to say. Amara lowered her voice. You've already caused enough attention. Adrian placed a small folder on the wooden counter. What's that? She asked cautiously. School documents. Amara frowned. For what school? The best school in the city. She pushed the folder back toward him without opening it. My son will attend the school I choose. Adrian kept his voice calm. And if the one I'm offering gives him more opportunities? Amara's eyes flashed. You think opportunities only come with money? No, Adrian said quietly. But money can open doors. Amara leaned closer across the counter. My son will not become one of your charity projects. It's not charity. Then what is it? Adrian hesitated. Responsibility. Amara shook her head slowly. No. Adrian blinked. No. I said no. Kofi looked between them curiously. Mama. Amara softened her voice slightly. Go wash your hands. Kofi ran toward the nearby water bucket. Once he was out of earshot, Amara spoke again. You humiliated me in front of this entire market, she said quietly. Adrian lowered his eyes. I know. You called my life a failure. I regret that. And now you appear with money and papers like that fixes everything. Adrian looked at her seriously. I'm trying to do the right thing. Amara's voice remained steady. 5 years ago, you did the easiest thing. What was that? You walked away. Adrian had no answer. She continued. Now you want the easiest thing again. Which is, to solve everything with money. Adrian shook his head. No. Then what do you want? Adrian looked toward Kofi, who was happily splashing water on his hands. Then he looked back at Amara. I want a chance. Amara's expression didn't soften. A chance for what? To be his father. Amara studied his face carefully. Then she gave an answer Adrian hadn't expected. No. The single word landed heavily between them. Adrian stared at her. You're refusing me? Yes. Even after the test? Yes. Adrian struggled to understand. Why? Amara's voice dropped to a whisper. Because fathers don't arrive 5 years late. And, as Adrian stood there, searching for words, he realized something terrifying. Winning her trust might be harder than finding her ever was. The next morning, the market woke up like it always did. Vendors opened their stalls. Motorcycles rattled past. The smell of frying oil filled the warm air. But something was different. Very different. Amara arrived early with Kofi, carrying their usual cooking pot and plastic chairs. When she reached her usual corner, she stopped. Mama. Look, Kofi whispered. The dusty space where her stall normally stood had changed overnight. A brand new wooden food stand had been built there. Not fancy, not flashy, but strong and clean. A small shade roof covered the cooking area. The ground beneath it had even been paved with smooth stones. Amara stared in disbelief. Who did this? She murmured. Several nearby traders were also whispering. I heard workers came very late last night. They finished everything before sunrise. Someone paid for all of it. Amara already knew the answer. She slowly looked across the street. Parked quietly under a tree was the same black SUV. Kofi's face lit up. It's my father. Before Amara could stop him, Kofi ran toward the vehicle. Kofi, she called. Too late. The boy had already reached the car. The door opened. Adrian stepped out. Kofi jumped happily. You came back. Adrian smiled gently. I told you I might. Kofi pointed excitedly toward the stall. Did you build that? Adrian glanced at the structure. Yes. Kofi's eyes widened. It's beautiful. Adrian crouched slightly. Do you like it? Yes. Kofi hugged him suddenly. Adrian froze for a moment, surprised. Then, he carefully hugged the boy back. Across the street, Amara watched silently. Her face revealed nothing. Adrian stood and walked slowly toward her stall. Kofi ran ahead. "Mama, look what he did." Amara continued arranging her cooking utensils. "I can see that." Adrian stopped a few steps away. "I hope you don't mind," he said calmly. Amara didn't look at him. "You should have asked first. I thought you might refuse." She finally turned toward him. "You thought correctly." The nearby traders pretended not to listen. Adrian remained calm. "It's not charity." "That's exactly what it is." "No," Adrian said quietly. "It's respect." Amara studied the stall again. The materials were simple but thoughtful. Even the cooking height had been designed for comfort. Still, she crossed her arms. "You think this will change my mind?" "No." "Then why do it?" Adrian glanced around the market. Because for the first time, he was seeing it differently. "I realized something yesterday," he said. "What?" "That I judged this place without understanding it." Amara raised an eyebrow. "And today you understand it?" "No. But I want to." Amara said nothing. Kofi tugged Adrian's sleeve again. "Father." The word made both adults freeze. Adrian looked down. "Yes." "Will you come tomorrow too?" Adrian smiled. "If your mother allows it." Kofi turned to Amara. "Mama." Amara sighed softly. She couldn't ignore the hopeful look on her son's face. "You can visit," she said carefully. "But nothing more." Adrian nodded. "That's enough." As the morning crowd began gathering around the new stall, something unusual happened. Customers started arriving faster than usual. The improved stall attracted attention. Business was better. Much better. Amara noticed it. But she refused to acknowledge Adrian. Still, something unexpected was happening. Kofi naturally stayed close to Adrian, as if something inside him already knew the connection. And Adrian noticed it too. But as the day ended and Adrian prepared to leave, Amara finally spoke again. "You're trying very hard." Adrian nodded. "Yes." She looked directly into his eyes. "But tell me something." "What?" "If the boy didn't have your birthmark, would you still be here?" The evening market slowly quieted as the sun disappeared behind the city buildings. Amara wiped the wooden counter of her stall while the last customers finished their meals. The new stand had brought more people than usual that day. But even with the improved business, her thoughts were restless. Kofi sat nearby, unusually quiet. He had been thinking all afternoon. Finally he spoke. "Mama." Amara glanced at him. "Yes." "Can I ask something?" "Of course." Kofi hesitated. "When people say the rich uncle is my father, are they telling the truth?" Amara's hands stopped moving. The moment she had been avoiding had finally arrived. "Yes," she said softly. Kofi stared at the ground for a moment. "So he really is my father?" "Yes." Kofi looked confused rather than happy. "Then why didn't he live with us before?" Amara sat beside him. "Because he didn't know you existed." Kofi frowned. "But now he knows." "Yes. And he wants to see me." Amara nodded slowly. Kofi's small mind tried to understand something much bigger than himself. "So, why are you angry with him?" Amara took a deep breath. "I'm not angry," she said gently. "I'm careful." "Why?" "Because sometimes people enter your life and leave again." Kofi looked toward the road, where Adrian usually parked his SUV. "Do you think he will leave again?" Amara didn't answer immediately. "I don't know." Just then, voices from two nearby traders drifted toward them. "That rich man comes here every day now. Maybe he's really the boy's father." He seemed serious. Kofi listened quietly. Then, he stood up. "Mama, I want to talk to him." Amara blinked. "Now?" "Yes." Before she could stop him, Kofi ran across the street. Adrian was leaning against his SUV, preparing to leave. He looked surprised when the boy ran toward him. "Kofi." The boy stopped in front of him, breathing fast. "Are you really my father?" Adrian crouched down slowly. "Yes," he said honestly. Kofi studied his face carefully. "Why didn't you come before?" Adrian swallowed. "Because I didn't know about you." Kofi nodded slowly. Then he asked another question. "Are you going to leave again?" The question hit Adrian harder than anything else. He shook his head. No. Promise. Adrian looked directly into the boy's eyes. I promise. Kofi seemed satisfied. He grabbed Adrian's hand and pulled him toward the stall. Mama, he promised. Amara looked up as they approached. Adrian stood awkwardly beside Kofi. He asked if I would leave again. Adrian explained quietly. And what did you say? I said no. Amara studied his face. Promises were easy to make. Keeping them was harder. Kofi climbed back onto his stool. I told him fathers deserve a chance. Both adults looked at him. You did? Adrian asked. Kofi nodded proudly. Yes. Amara sighed softly. You shouldn't make big decisions like that. Kofi shrugged. But it feels right. Adrian smiled faintly. You're a wise boy. Kofi grinned. I know. The moment felt strangely peaceful. But Amara's mind was still racing. She looked at Adrian again. You realize something, don't you? What? He asked. This changes everything. Adrian nodded. I know. She crossed her arms. But it also makes things more complicated. How? Amara glanced at Kofi. Then she looked back at Adrian. Because now he knows the truth. Adrian understood immediately. The boy now had expectations. And expectations came with responsibilities. Kofi suddenly looked up again. I have another question. Adrian smiled. What is it? The boy tilted his head. If you're my father, does that mean we're a family now? The question hung in the quiet evening air. And neither adult answered right away. The morning sky was gray, and a soft breeze moved through the market. Amara arrived at her stall earlier than usual. She needed the quiet. Kofi helped her arrange the plates, humming happily to himself. Ever since the conversation the previous evening, the boy seemed lighter, hopeful. That worried her. Children trusted too easily. Good morning, Mama, Kofi said cheerfully. Good morning. He looked toward the road again. Do you think you will come today? Amara avoided the question. Focus on the spoons. But deep inside, she wondered the same thing. Across the city, Adrian Cole sat inside his office. The massive glass windows revealed a skyline most people could only dream about. Yet Adrian barely noticed it. Daniel stood across the desk, holding a stack of documents. Are you sure about this, sir? Daniel asked. Adrian nodded. Yes. Daniel flipped through the papers again. This transfers half of your personal assets to the child. I know. That's billions. I know. Daniel looked stunned. You're doing this without any legal pressure. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Some debts aren't legal. What do you mean? Adrian stared at the birthmark on his wrist. 5 years of absence is a very expensive mistake. Daniel hesitated. What if Amara still refuses you? Adrian sighed quietly. Then at least the boy will have security. And you? Adrian closed the file gently. I'll leave them alone. Daniel shook his head slowly. You're serious. Adrian stood up. Completely. Later that afternoon, the black SUV stopped near the market once again. But Adrian didn't step out immediately. He sat inside for a moment, holding the folder tightly. Then he opened the door. Kofi spotted him instantly. Father. The boy ran across the road again. Adrian smiled warmly. Hello, Kofi. You came back. I promised. Kofi grabbed his hand. Mama is over there. They walked toward the stall together. Amara looked up as they approached. Her eyes immediately noticed the folder in Adrian's hand. What is that? She asked cautiously. Adrian placed the folder on the counter. Legal documents. Amara didn't touch them. For what? For Kofi. She frowned. What kind of documents? Adrian spoke calmly. They transfer half of everything I own to him. The words stunned the entire stall. Even nearby traders stopped moving. Amara stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. Kofi looked confused. What does that mean? Adrian crouched beside him. It means you will always be safe. Amara's voice sharpened. My son was already safe. Adrian nodded. I know. Then why do this? Adrian's answer was simple. Because I can't give him the past. The quiet honesty surprised her. But I can give him the future. Amara finally opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. This is real. Yes. She closed the folder slowly. And if I refuse? Adrian took a deep breath. Then I leave. The word startled her. You leave? Yes. He looked down at Kofi. I won't force myself into your lives. Kofi's smile disappeared. You're leaving. Adrian forced a gentle smile. Only if your mother wants that. The boy's eyes filled with panic. He suddenly grabbed Adrian's arm tightly. No. The cry echoed across the quiet market. I don't want you to go. Amara froze. Kofi looked up at her desperately. Mama, please. The child's voice trembled. I don't want money. He held Adrian's arm tighter. I want my father. The words shattered the calm between them. And for the first time, Amara didn't know what to say. The market had grown unusually quiet. Kofi's small hands still clung tightly to Adrian's arm. I don't want money, the boy repeated softly. I want my father. Amara stood behind the stall, her heart pounding harder than she wanted to admit. The words she had waited 5 years to hear had finally arrived, but from the mouth of her child. Adrian gently placed his hand over Kofi's. Hey, look at me, he said softly. Kofi raised his teary eyes. You're not losing me, Adrian continued. I'm right here. The boy sniffed. Then don't go. Adrian glanced up at Amara. That decision isn't mine. Every eye in the market seemed to be watching them now. Amara slowly walked around the stall until she stood directly in front of Adrian. You really meant it, she said quietly. You were ready to walk away. Yes. Even after discovering he's your son? Adrian nodded. If forcing myself into his life would hurt him. Then yes. Kofi tightened his grip again. But it will hurt me if you leave. Adrian's chest tightened. Amara looked down at her son, then back at Adrian. You've been trying very hard these past days, she said slowly. I'm trying to do what I should have done 5 years ago. And what's that? Take responsibility. Amara studied his face carefully. There was no arrogance in his eyes anymore. No pride. Only something she had not seen before. Humility. She sighed quietly. There's something you should know. Adrian frowned slightly. What? Amara folded her arms. The moment you grabbed Kofi's wrist that day. I already knew. Adrian blinked. You knew? Yes. That I was his father? Amara nodded. The birthmark gave it away immediately. Adrian looked stunned. Then why did you pretend you weren't sure? Amara's voice softened. Because I needed to see something. What? She gestured around the market. This. Adrian followed her gaze, the new stall, the busy customers, the small community that had quietly supported Amara for years. I needed to know whether the man who insulted me that day was the same man standing here now. And Amara looked at Kofi. The boy still held Adrian's arm like it was the most valuable thing in the world. And I needed to know if you were here for your son. Or just your pride. Adrian slowly exhaled. And now you have your answer? Amara nodded. Yes. Kofi looked between them anxiously. So, what happens now? Amara smiled softly at her son. Now we stop fighting. She turned to Adrian again. But understand something clearly. I'm listening. Being his father doesn't mean buying his life. Adrian nodded. I understand. It means earning his trust every single day. I will. She looked at him for another long moment. Then she stepped slightly closer. Well, Father, she said calmly, are you ready to help serve food? Adrian blinked in surprise. What? Amara handed him a serving spoon. You said you wanted to understand this place. Kofi burst into laughter. Yes, Father can work here. The nearby traders chuckled. Adrian looked down at the spoon in his hand for the first time in years. He felt strangely happy. All right, he said with a small smile. Where do I start? Amara pointed to the pot. Serve the rice. Adrian stepped beside her, behind the stall. The billionaire who once mocked the street vendor now stood serving customers beside her. Kofi grinned proudly. Because in that small moment, something more valuable than money had been built. A family. And Adrian finally understood the truth. The greatest wealth he would ever have was standing right beside him.